Hey y'all! That sounded so Southern. I'm so sorry. My accent is going to protrude this entire time. But like he said, my name is Avera Santo. I'm 23 years old, so I'm actually not that much older than a lot of you here. I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, the birthplace of Mardi Gras. Don't let anybody tell you it started in New Orleans, Louisiana, because it didn't. They stole it from us. It's probably more popular in New Orleans right now, but it started with us. So just so I can get an idea, how many of you have actually heard a talk on homosexuality before, whether at a Steubenville conference or where did y'all hear it at? Steubenville? Okay. Who said it? Was it Father Mike's? Was it Father Mike's talk? Oh, Sarah Swafford? Okay. So a few of you, I guess. But a lot of complaints that I get, or that are heard, especially from young people that I've noticed, is that people like, I think Sarah Swafford might have given a talk on it. Father Mike Schmitz has done an amazing talk on it at a Steubenville conference. He's written a book about it. It's fantastic. Jason Everett, who I think he did a really awesome YouTube video on it. But the main complaint I hear about most of those people is that, well, Jason Everett, what, did Miss Crystalina just have like her 7th kid or something like that? Or Jason is married. Father Mike is a priest. None of these people actually experience same-sex attractions. So when you go home, or when they go home, they don't have to deal with the ramifications, or not ramifications, but they don't have to deal with actually experiencing same-sex attractions. But lucky for you guys, you don't have that excuse with me, because I've dealt with it for several years. And I've experienced it for several years. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about my testimony and kind of overlap Catholic Church teaching, specifically directly from the Catechism. I'm going to go over the 3 places where the Catechism talks about same-sex attractions or homosexuality and how it's supposed to be lived with by people who experience it. So, it should be known that people who experience same-sex attraction, we're all called to chastity. It's one of the main points that the Catechism talks about. So we're all called to chastity. We're not any different from really anybody else. But the first paragraph is Catechism 2357, and I'm going to read the whole thing, and I'm going to kind of break it down as we go. So, paragraph 2357. Homosexuality refers to relations between men or between women who experience an exclusive or predominant sexual attraction towards persons of the same sex. It has taken a great variety of forms through the centuries and in different cultures. Its psychological genesis remains largely unexplained, meaning we don't exactly know how it forms, how it manifests in people, when it manifests in people. I didn't notice it until I was probably around 14 or 15 years old. Some people don't remember a time when they weren't attracted to the same sex. It all just depends. We don't really know where it comes from yet. Basing itself on sacred scripture, basing itself on the Bible, which presents homosexual acts as acts of great depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. Now, according to Wikipedia, intrinsically, the word intrinsically means in an essential or natural way. So the example phrase it gives is murder is intrinsically evil. So they are contrary to natural law. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine, effective, and sexual complementarity. Under no circumstances can they be approved. So basically, all that to say, acting on same-sex attractions is wrong in the eyes of the church. So, when I was in high school, specifically my sophomore year, I went to a conference, kind of, I think much like this one. There was about maybe 500 kids there, all middle school age, all high school age, and it was this big, it was called ACYC, it's the Archdiocesan Catholic Youth Conference for where I'm from, and I went purely to get out of playing a soccer tournament where my lung had collapsed in the game the 2 years before, and I didn't feel like going back. I wanted to be on the beach with a bunch of Catholic weirdos. That was better for me. So I didn't really care about my faith at this point, but when I went, specifically when I went to Adoration, which is right downstairs if you haven't gone, if you get the chance, I highly recommend that you do. When I went to Adoration that night, God made himself very present to me in a way that I had never really experienced him before. He made it known to me that he wanted a relationship with me, that he wanted to be a part of my life, and he wanted to be the epicenter of my life. He wanted to be everything to me. And that frazzled me, but I was on board at that point. But it was at that same conference that one of my best friends at the time told me that she was having a bit of difficulty wanting to go to confession that night. So this was earlier the same day. And I was asking, why don't you want to confess? Like, these are priests who have heard confessions from federal prisoners, you're not going to tell them anything that they haven't heard probably before 9 a.m. today. And she said, well, I just don't want to tell him that I had a sexual encounter with another girl. And she kind of came out to me as bisexual. And I think I had like one uncle growing up that experienced it, but it was still such a far off kind of thing for me, far off kind of concept. Really the only time that I had ever heard the term gay thrown around is when guys on the football team, like when somebody messed up a play, they said, oh, you're gay, or that's gay, or whatever. Like, I had never really experienced somebody that close to me especially actually have to go through the experience of having same-sex attractions. I didn't really know what that meant. But she told me she had gone to confession that night, and she had felt a little bit better about it. And we just kind of kept talking about it as the time went on. This was my sophomore year of high school. I was around 16 years old at the time. So she and I, we keep talking about it, especially, in the context of God. And again, I really didn't know how to approach the subject, but she and I, because I was really the only person that knew, we just kept getting closer and closer and closer, to the point where I started asking myself a few questions. Now, I think I had experienced some form of homosexual attraction possibly a couple of years before this, but didn't really know what it was, or didn't know what it meant to experience that. So I kind of just brushed it off and didn't really worry about it. But now I was kind of faced with it, especially when she texted me on the car ride home as we were sitting right next to each other, or we were on a beach trip with my youth group, and we were texting right next to each other because that's how young people talk. But she texted me just saying, I think I like you. And my knee-jerk response is, I like you too. I am scared out of my mind at this point. Again, this isn't something that's talked about at all. Now, I grew up in Catholic school from the time I was pre-K 3, which I had to repeat another time because I was too young, so I did preschool 3 times, and all the way up until the 12th grade. So I had been the majority of my life at this point all through high school. And no one said anything about homosexual attractions or same-sex attractions or homosexuality. I had never heard of it spoken about from the pulpit. I had never heard it spoken about in my religion classes. No one talked about it at all. So in my mind, I had kind of equated it to slavery almost, where slavery was almost so bad that it seemed like no one would ever say anything about it. And in my mind, because nobody was talking about same-sex attractions or homosexuality, it must be just that bad. There must be something so wrong with me that I just happened to experience this. I thought for a while that I was cursed, that God was pissed at me for doing something, and I'm just kind of questioning, what did I do? Like, what did I do that was that bad to make you this angry at me that I would experience this? So this is my mindset surrounding same-sex attractions or homosexuality. Now, if we look back at what the Catechism says, homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. Note the language there. Homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. This says nothing about me as a person. There's nothing wrong with me. It's the act itself that's the problem. Now, the desire itself, is true, is intrinsically disordered, meaning that there is a natural order for our sexualities. God created them male and female and created them with complementarity to be together. A man and a man cannot be together in that way, and neither can a woman and a woman. We are naturally designed for each other. We're literally like puzzle pieces. We fit together. That's how we were made. That's how God orchestrated even our anatomies. You know, two men can't get pregnant. You know, if a man got pregnant, his hips would break because he can't carry a child. But the way that the woman's hips are shaped form that birth canal so that a baby can fit. It's beautiful how we're designed. We were designed with that complementarity. And two of the same things cannot have complementarity because guess what? They're the same. They're not going to give each other what the other is lacking. So again, homosexual acts are disordered. The person who experiences those desires has nothing wrong with them. So don't go around thinking that there's something wrong with either you or somebody you love that experiences this, because I guarantee you there's nothing wrong with you. It is the desire itself that is disordered. So we're going to go on to the next one. The number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies is not negligible. And just another one, deep-seated. So deep-seated, according to Wikipedia, is firmly, I can't even read my handwriting, firmly established at a deep or profound level. So the analogy that I would give is think of a sapling versus a 50-year-old tree. A tree that's been growing for 50 years, its roots are going to be deeply ingrained in the ground. Whereas a sapling, because it hasn't had very much time to grow, its roots aren't going to be very deep. So we're talking about deep-seated homosexual tendencies have really taken root in a person. So that's what this is saying here. The number of men and women who have these deep-seated homosexual tendencies is not negligible. This inclination, which is objectively disordered, constitutes for most of them a trial, and I will attest to that. It sucks sometimes. They must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. Now, a lot of you, I don't know how many of you have heard of, let's say, there was a situation a couple years ago where I think a female teacher at a Catholic school had gotten fired from her job because she got quote-unquote married to her same-sex partner, so they fired her because she had they signed a morality clause, which is just like at my Catholic high school. You have to abide by church teaching in order to teach at that school. And she broke the rules, so she was fired. A lot of people were up in arms about this because they were saying that she was unjustly discriminated against. Here's the thing. Let's say you're in the army or something. I don't know if any of you have military parents or any of you want to go into the army, but let's just say you go up to your military officer and you say, I like this, this, and this about the military, but I don't agree with this, so I'm just not going to abide by that. You would get booted out of the military faster than your head would spin, okay? Like, you can't do that. In the same way, you can't just pick and choose which teachings you believe in the church. You know, I mean, if I say that, I think of that as, if you don't like it, get out. Like, honestly, it is that simple. If you don't want to abide, you don't have to stay here. But it really is as simple as that. And this goes for really any teaching as that the Catholic Church teaches include. If you haven't read this whole thing through, I highly suggest that you do. So going on with that, these persons are called to fulfill God's will in their lives, and if they are Christians, to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross, the difficulties that they may encounter in their condition. Luke 9:23. I don't know if any of you have heard it, but Luke 9:23 says, and he said to all, this is Jesus speaking, and he said to all, if any man would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. This doesn't say whosoever, excluding people who experience same-sex attractions, or excluding people who are a certain race, or excluding people. It doesn't exclude anybody. It says whoever wants to follow me, whoever wants to be my follower must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Father Mike Schmitz made an excellent point when he said, if it wasn't same-sex attractions, it would be something else. We all have to suffer in life with something. Even Jesus himself didn't avoid suffering. So what makes us think we're going to avoid it? We can't. So just because a person might struggle with or suffer from their experience of same-sex attractions, it doesn't mean that God is punishing them, or it doesn't mean that, there's something so wrong with them. It simply means that this is their cross. Again, going back to the last paragraph, we don't necessarily know how it manifests. So a lot of times, people might not, I didn't ask to experience this. So it's not a choice for me to experience sexual desire towards other women. I didn't ask for that. And I struggle to think that really anybody does ask for that. It's however it manifests, it's there. Now, again, we don't know exactly how it manifests, so what we have to do is we have to say, okay, now that I know that I struggle with it, what do I do now? How do I live with it? This goes for anything. This goes for any type of sin. This goes for any type of addiction, or this goes with anything. So just because a person might experience same-sex attractions, it doesn't make them other. It doesn't make them like off to the side over here, and we're over here in our tight-knit bunch. So when I was growing up, I was really afraid to say anything about my same-sex attractions because I was ostracized. Or I know that the topic itself was ostracized. So even when I was in high school, there were kids who led active gay lifestyles, and I saw how they were treated. I saw especially how the guys picked on other guys if they were any bit feminine. I saw how they were picked on. I saw how they were laughed at. I saw how they were shoved around in the halls. Even the girls could be petty, like, oh, I don't want to be in the dressing room with her because she might, get the wrong idea or something like that. Just because a person experiences same-sex attractions doesn't mean that they like you. Let's get this out of our way right now. In the same way, guys, just because you're a girl, if they're attracted to girls, well, there are some guys that are like that. There's like any girls in a girl in a skirt. But just because a person exhibits or has these attractions doesn't mean that they're gonna pounce or anything like that. These could be your friends who are experiencing this. And it also really doesn't discriminate. So anybody could be experiencing this and might not feel like they can say anything just because it is a very polarizing thing. So if a person comes to you with this information, talk to them about it. Ask them about their experiences. Ask them how you can walk with them in this life. We're called to accompany one another. The saints often traveled in packs. Saints were friends or Saint Benedict and Saint Scholastica were brother and sister, or Saint Francis of Assisi and Saint Clare of Assisi. There are all these friends that got to heaven or walked towards eternity together. So no one is an island. Nobody gets there by themselves. So we are called to make this journey together. So anybody that comes to you with this, don't ostracize them. Again, go through asking them the questions. Ask them, how it affects their life. I'll say this too. I was afraid to tell a lot of my friends. But once I did tell them, it was a liberating feeling. Because now I had somebody to talk to. And again, I believe the statistic is 1 in 6 people struggle with this to some degree. So it's not like you don't, I find it very hard to believe that none of you in this room know somebody who experiences same-sex attractions or something like that. So I'm not trying to point any fingers or anything, but I'm saying that it is very possible that you know someone that does. And you very well might be one of the only people that they can talk to about it. So you can offer your hand, especially if you're close to the person, offer your hand and just offer to walk with them through life. I mean, you don't have to be buddy-buddy, especially if you're not that close with the person already, but give them an outlet, somebody to talk to, because ultimately I think that was one of the biggest things that I needed, and it was one of the things that I just didn't get. The third one, the last one, homosexual persons are called to chastity. Now, some people want the wording of the catechism changed, especially when they say intrinsically disordered. I'm thinking of one Jesuit priest in particular who we're not going to name here. He's laughing. He knows who it is. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. So. But there are some people who want the catechism changed. I think he wants it to be differently ordered instead of intrinsically disordered, because intrinsically sounds harsh. Let me tell you, sometimes the truth pill is very hard to swallow, but we still need to go through with it. We still need to swallow it. So this would be the only thing that I would change in the catechism where it says homosexual persons. Jason Everett put it very well where he said there are only 3 types of persons. There's divine persons, the 3 persons of the Most Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Angelic persons, angels or demons. Human persons, either male or female. This is the problem that I have with people either referring to themselves or others as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, because here's the thing. It's inaccurate because it gives too narrow of a view of who the human person is. God created the human person male and female, and he created them very good, it says in Genesis. He created them good. Now, the 2 things that I mentioned, male and female, are the only 2 sexual identities that exist. Those were created by God himself. Really, I think these terms like gay, lesbian, or homosexual persons weren't even used, I think, before the 1950s, I want to say. That might be inaccurate. It might be 1850, but I believe it is around the 1950s. But these are still very recent attributes that we kind of pinpoint or slap on the human person. So these are not accurate representations because you're looking at the person through the lens of sexual attraction. You, as human persons, are so much more than your attractions. You are more than what you have done. You are more than the sins that you've committed. You are more than the good things that you have done. Because, again, going back to Genesis, God created them male and female. God created them in his image and in his likeness. Whoever you are a son or a daughter of God. That is your identity. That is how you should look at yourself. That is how you should look at other people. Now, I'm not saying that if a person calls themselves gay, you should be like, oh no, but you're a son or a daughter of God. You shouldn't say that. But I'm not saying that you should do that. But I'm saying in the way that you treat other people. And even in the way that you look at yourself, especially when the times when you hit rock bottom. I have absolutely been there where you think you are the scum of the earth. You feel so horrible about yourself, like you've committed the same sin over again. You have to go to confession for the 500th time for the same exact thing, the same thing you've been doing for years. That still doesn't define you, even on the 500th and first time. None of that defines you. God himself, the creator of every good gift, James 1:17, created you. And Jesus, in one of his discourses, says, God, they are your gift to me. Every single one of you is a gift. Every single one of you is created good in the image and likeness of God. That right there is your identity. One of the turning points for me was when I was in high school, my chaplain, whose name was Father Dan, I went into his office one day. It was probably my senior year, and I am seething at this point. I'd been kind of dealing with this same-sex attraction for a while. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know how to live day to day. I didn't know how to stay out of the confessional after more than a week. I just felt like I was coming apart at the seams. I went into his office. I sat down in front of him, and I said, "Father Dan, I think I'm gay and I don't know what to do." I start bawling, I start crying, just lost it, And he kind of starts chuckling at me. I was like, "Father Dan, this is serious. I need you to pay attention. Did you hear what I just said to you?" And he looks at me very intently and he says, still chuckling, "You are so good. You are so good." The fact that he had said that to me, I didn't really understand what it meant at that point. But the older that I've gotten, I realized just how profound of a statement that was. He looked at me in that moment how God saw me. Not how the world saw me, not how the LGBT community might have seen me. He saw me as God saw me. He saw me as good. He saw me as a beloved daughter of God who was ransomed by the blood of Christ, who did not want heaven without me, as if I was the only one. You know that Christ would have come and died in the same way, even if it was only you that he would save, right? He would do it for each and every one of you as if you were the only one. When Father Dan looked at me like that, no one really ever had. I was an athlete growing up, so people called me the athlete. I was a pretty smart kid in school, so I was the person to go to when you needed help with your religion homework. People saw me as what I could offer them. I could offer them hopefully a state championship or a junior Olympic championship. I can offer them hope with their homework. I could offer them whatever. They only really sought me for what I could give. God doesn't want that from you. He just wants you to give him your time. He wants you to give him your brokenness. He wants you to give him all of you. And he wants to take you exactly as you are. He wanted to take me exactly as I am. Whatever cross it is that you are going through, I don't know if it's same-sex attraction or whatever, but look, we all have crosses. We all have to suffer to some degree. This is just one issue. This is just one. It also says that I think pornography addiction, the desire for pornography is intrinsically disordered, or the desire for a husband to sleep with his wife with another woman who's not his wife outside of marriage is also intrinsically disordered, or something like that. This is just one thing. Ultimately, while this language does sound harsh on the ears, the immediate thing that comes to my mind from the Gospels is Jesus flipping the tables in the temple. God is trying to remove anything from your life that doesn't deserve your heart, that doesn't deserve your attention. He wants it out, and he wants to be there himself. He wants you to make your heart a home. So yes, while same-sex attraction for me is that cross, and it is extremely hard at times, I'm not going to lie, I think it's precisely that weight that makes it probably the most beautiful cross that I carry. Because it puts me in a position where I think I look a great deal like Christ crucified, which is one of his defining moments. We're called to be Christ-like, but then so many of us forget about the fact that he suffered on that cross. We're called to that as well. But in that, we are also called to the resurrection. You're not going to suffer forever. So while you are here, while you are suffering, whatever it is that you're suffering with, I want you to know that the promise of the resurrection has been offered to you. God has already offered himself. He has already given you the gift of your salvation. Now it's your turn to accept it. Just because you're given a gift doesn't mean you have to open it. But I want you to, every single one of you. And more than that, Christ wants you to open that gift, because he does not want heaven without you. He created you in this world, in this space, in this time, in this chair you're sitting in, exactly where you are, to love you. All you have to do now is respond. If you don't know how to respond well, ask Him how. I'll tell you, in my prayer life, I suck at praying. I suck at loving God. But the little that I can love Him, I try to. The little that my heart can give, I try to give that. There's a beautiful passage of Scripture where, I don't know if you recognize the story, but if you'll recall, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. So, when Jesus had already resurrected, Peter comes in contact with Christ again. And Christ takes him off and says, 3 times, Peter, do you love me? In our language, in English, we see that word love used 3 times, but there's actually 2 different words in Greek that both translate to love in English. So he's using 2 different words here. The first 2 times, Jesus asks, Peter, do you love me as your God? And Peter responds, yes, Lord, you know that I love you as a friend. He's not there yet. Again, he asks him, Peter, do you love me as your God? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you as a friend. He's still not there yet. Christ knows exactly where you are. The issue that I have with people saying, well, I just want to find myself, is that that gives the indication that you're somehow lost, that no one knows where you are. God knows exactly where you are, and He can come and find you at any moment. He can come and get you at any moment. That 3rd time, Jesus says, Peter, do you love me as your friend? He says, yes, Lord, you know that I love you as your friend. If you can only love God that much, no matter where it is that you're struggling, no matter what it is that you're struggling with, if you can only love God as your friend, do that. He can honor that. He will honor that. He honored that in Peter. He will honor that for you. If you can only love God as your friend, do that. And know that, again, yes, same-sex attraction is hard. Any sin that we all struggle with, while it is hard, it's not the end. It is not the end-all be-all. If you suffer well on earth, you will be rewarded. That's what heaven is for. God wants each and every one of you in heaven with Him for eternity. Anything less than complete and total union with God is hell, figuratively and literally.